Well, good morning. What do you think of when you hear the word faith? That word can be a charged one when we talk about it in a spiritual sense. It can be a loaded word, mainly because many of us in our younger days may have been told that we had to believe something simply because a spiritual authority of some kind said so. We may have been asked to check our brains at the door and just have blind faith, with the message that you better believe this or else. Dire consequences. And in that sense, faith can be used almost as a weapon. But that's not what I'm talking about this morning. What I'm talking about is a much different definition. Rather than blind faith, we're talking about visionary faith. It's an actual power that we have. And what it does, in the words of Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, it's the perceiving power of the mind linked with the ability to shape substance. Perceiving power of the mind linked with the ability to shape substance. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? I had to memorize that definition in ministerial school, and to be honest, it felt like fluffy nothing to me. Just words, jargon. I really didn't get how extraordinary that idea was. That is, until the Q process brought to my attention how I was using my power of faith to create experiences that I did not want in my life. You see it? I caught myself perceiving something that was only true in my own mind, that it was too hard for me to write the book that I've begun, that I didn't have what it took to write it. And I could see so clearly in that moment how I had then proceeded to shape the substance of my life to be in accordance with that mistaken reality. Do you see it? Every time I sat down to write, it was difficult. Nothing would come, no inspiration, dry. And yet that belief was totally untrue. It was made up, it was false, it was incorrect, and yet that did not take away its power until I saw it. Until then, I was as chained to that truth. I was as locked into it as if I was chained to it, with what William Blake calls mind-forged manacles. I love that. Well, I don't love it, but I like the sound of the words. Mind-forged manacles. What an aha moment that was for me. I have to share that with you. When I saw that it was all tied to perception, or actually misperception, really. Two people can have the exact same experience and each one of them have a different perspective of the whole thing, a different perception of what happened. Do you know what I'm talking about here? Have you ever had a conversation with someone that you thought you were saying one thing and they were hearing another? I heard about a very wise teacher who always kept this ball near her desk that was black on one side and white on the other side. And one day she found two of her students arguing, it was a boy and a girl, and she brought them into her classroom, and she had each one stand on opposite sides of the desk and then place the ball in the middle, and she asked them both what color the ball was. And each one, it was white, no it was black, no it was white, no it was black. They both were convinced the other person was wrong. What's the matter with you? You say that that's black, it's white. And they discovered, of course, that neither one was wrong. The point of view depended on where they stood. You see it? Their viewing point. And what we have to remember is that the same thing goes for us, that our world is colored by our perception, our viewing point. And how we see what we see makes a difference. How we perceive the world has tremendous significance. It has a lot of clout, our perceptions. It's powerful enough to shape substance. And that is to actually create our experience of the reality we believe it to be in the physical world. So, in my case, through doing worksheet after worksheet, I saw clearly how my perception was creating my experience. The perceiving power of the mind linked with the ability to shape substance. So is there something in your life that you're perceiving from a certain viewing point? And then having faith in that perception See? Think about that in your own life. Is there something going on in your life that you recognize now is a perception of how you think it is, and that you're, listening to what the mirror is reflecting back to you? As Henry Ford is quoted as saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And if I believe that life is difficult, and Gary alluded to this last week, then my perception will be that I have a difficult life. Do you see it? If I think I'm not good enough, or talented enough, or thin enough, or prosperous enough, I'll continue to bump up against that belief. And my life will mirror it back to me, and then I will take that as evidence that it's true. This is what we do. That's how powerful we are. Now there's good news here. You ready? Yes. Lean in. Our perceptions can change. We have the ability to make that change. Every one of us. We can see something different than what our current experience is telling us, and that's a wonderful tool that we have. So here's a question for you that the psychologist Maria Namath is fond of asking when she's doing work with you. Would it be all right if your life got easier? Well, guess what? That can actually happen when we stop making agreements with difficulty. Stop putting our faith in the mirror or the projection. Shift it from the outer appearance to the inner truth that we know. So the question is not, do we have enough faith, like it's some sort of a deficiency? The question is, where are we putting it? Do we have faith in health or illness? In writing ability or the empty page? In the abundance of the universe or lack? In the power within us or the outer appearance? That's a big one. Because it's through that inner power of faith that we can see beyond the outer signs. And the truth is that we can never trust what the outer appearance is telling us. What appears solid is really space. The quantum scientist Werner Heisenberg said, the atoms or elementary particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities. Isn't that cool? So the perceiving power of the mind is just that, a perception of possibility. And we have a choice as to where we put our faith, and that choice will determine our experience. But if we are affirming one thing, we could go off and do all our affirmations, but at the same time we're believing something much different, which one's going to win out? The belief will always win, hands down. Our feeling about what's happening overrides our cognitive perspective. See, we can rationally think this, but it's the feeling of what we believe that is driving the bus. So we pen ourselves in by these limiting beliefs, and they're not true. So a shift in perception is necessary if we want to create something new and greater in our lives. Bottom line. And that means we learn to celebrate the seed. It's my talk title. What does that mean? Well, it means we begin to see the potential flower in the seed before it blooms. You see? We see the orchard in the apple pit, right? Before it becomes one. We see the oak tree in the acorn. Now, at the first service, I said unicorn. It just ruined the moment completely. And I promised them that I was going to leave it in for the second service. So here's your unicorn. I want to meet that person. But you know what? It's like Michelangelo seeing the angel in the marble and just freeing it. And we all have this ability to see that. There's just one little thing that gets in the way. It's called fear. Fear is what sees the empty page and makes it mean that it's hopeless to try and write anything. And we've been programmed and conditioned to live from fear and self-doubt, and we have to break through that conditioning. Recently I read this about fear. It's having faith in certain images created by the mind, rather than having faith in the mighty creative power that is within us. So we have to start questioning what our mind is telling us. I think of Byron Katie's work. Is it true? Is what I'm believing true? There's a story told in the East about an artist who painted a tiger that was so real he became afraid to enter the room it was hanging in. Now we laugh at the silliness of the story, but guess what? In essence, that's exactly what we do when our mind conjures up something scary, a frightening image, and we imbue it with reality. See? We believe our thoughts, and then we deal with what shows up. We react to it. It's amazing to me what we do. We put our faith into something that's not real. And when we do that, we choose a life, a reality that is filled with fear, anxiety, worry, competition, defensiveness, separation, all those things. Charles Fillmore describes fear as the great paralyzer of mental action. I think that's very clear. And he says, fear throws dust in our eyes and hides the mighty spiritual forces that are always with us. It clouds our vision. It clouds our thinking. So faith is the power to create our experience of reality by the perceptions that we deem to be real. We realize them. So what are you realizing? What are you putting your faith in? And would it be all right with you if life got easier? So then we begin by questioning our thoughts and our established beliefs. We be willing to ask questions and get new answers. And faith can lift us from this limited level of thinking to greater heights simply by shifting to a higher perspective, celebrating the seed. And that raises us to a place of spiritual strength as we come into the awareness of the truth, you see. So we're talking here about visionary faith because it's based on something that we can internally visualize so clearly that we attain a deep conviction that it's true. That's the work. The Bengali poet Rabindranath Tagore said, "Faith is the bird that feels the light when the dawn is still dark." And that's the kind of vision we need to aspire to, seeing what can be and then feeling it arriving before it actually shows up. And then engaging in actions that demonstrate our inspired vision. There's a saying that reads, "Imagination is hearing the melody of the future. Faith is dancing to the melody." And so we listen for the melody, but it's when we start dancing to it, dancing with it, that we step on this path that brings it into manifestation. And that takes commitment. There's a story about a man who called himself the Great Zambruti. And he used to walk on a tightrope across Niagara Falls. You remember that guy? One time he walked with a wheelbarrow from one side to the other. There he is. And when he reached the other side, a young man rushed up to him and said, "You are the great Zambruti, and you are so great that you could get right back up there and cross again with that wheelbarrow. I know you could. I have faith in you." And Zambruti said, "Yes, I could, but I'm not going to." But the young man was persistent. He said, "Yes, but you are so great, and I have such faith in you. I know you could just climb right back up there and walk that whole thing again with that wheelbarrow." And again, Zambruti said, "No, I'm not going to do it again." And this time, the young man was even more insistent. He said, "I have faith in the great Zambruti. I know that if you wanted to, you could just do it one more time." And with that, the great Zambruti looked at him, held up the wheelbarrow, and said, "Get in." Good answer. So how committed are you to realizing your life? Faith is the faculty that opens the door, but ask yourself, am I ready to hop in to demonstrate this? Now, when we look at the power of faith metaphysically, we find that the disciple Peter is held up as representing faith. And there's a story in the 14th chapter of Matthew that illustrates why that is. The disciples are sailing along on the Sea of Galilee while Jesus has gone off alone to pray. And in the darkness, just before the dawn, the disciples see a ghostly figure walking towards them on the water. And they all become fearful. But then Peter realizes it's Jesus, and he said, "Lord, if it's you, bid me come to you on the water." And then Peter steps out of the boat and starts to walk on the water toward Jesus. And we have actual footage of that moment right here. But then a strong wind arises, and he shifts his focus, and instead of begins to pay attention to the turmoil beneath him. And he probably asked himself, what on earth am I doing out here on this water? And he began to sink. Now there's great metaphysics in this story. Have you ever found yourself stepping out in faith with your eye fixed on a positive outcome, feeling Spirit's guidance, feeling it? And maybe you took those first few steps in confidence towards your goal. Well, then you're like Peter getting out of the boat. And if we can stay focused on that goal and stay in the awareness of the Christ within us, the higher self, the greater mind that is leading us, that is beckoning us to become more, if we keep our eyes on the prize, then we don't become distracted by life's experiences. However, if we lose that awareness, you see, if we become focused on the turmoil around us, on the storms of life, on the outer appearances, we can drown in our own despair. Especially if we ask ourselves, what made me think I could even do this? We can sink even deeper, which is what was happening to me when I was trying to write. Now, we might sometimes be critical of Peter, thinking, well, he didn't have enough faith. He got out of the boat. He got into that wheelbarrow. He joined the dance. But here's the thing. He had enough faith. At first it was in Jesus, and then it shifted to the unstable sea. And this is really the pivotal point of this story. This is where the metaphysics comes in. He took his first step, and then he took his eyes off the goal, off of the Christ who had called him, and he began to see the problems, the strength of the wind, the stormy sea, and he became frightened. Fear can be faith in a negative outcome. You know, I started out writing my book with vision and inspiration. I got out of the boat. But then I made an agreement with difficulty. And I took my eyes off the vision. Instead, all I saw was the empty page. And I focused on that, instead of remembering that I was feeling called to write. And that it was something else inside of me that was running the show. I forgot that. And then it became so hard. So difficult, nothing coming through. I would write something and end up deleting the whole thing. And the more discouraged I got, the worse it became. And I just gave up trying. You know, it takes a certain measure of audacity to look at the outer appearance and hold fast to your faith in the invisible, to celebrate the seed, to bless the blank page. But here's the thing, we have within us all we need to be lifted up by the power of Spirit within us and carried through any turmoil. It takes visionary focus and trust to continue confidently walking toward that outcome with faith when the evidence of it has yet to appear in the physical realm. And so we need to learn to traverse this in-between time from planting to harvest. And when I had that insightful aha moment that I had been creating this whole experience in my life that I didn't want, wow. But it didn't just change overnight to one that I like better. The book's not complete yet. But I had to plant a new seed. I had to tend it with a daily spiritual practice of continuing to mine any limiting beliefs around my writing that came up, and then with self-compassion, shift them to more kinder, more healing, more loving, more true beliefs. And it took authentic action, worksheet after worksheet after worksheet, dancing with this new melody that I wanted to see come forth, and then taking embodied action that demonstrated the new belief. which was working with a coach and committing to writing days and writing times and following through. And suddenly the writing is flowing like it never has before. It's flowing like a river. All stemming from a shift in perception followed by authentic action. Joseph Campbell describes our true self as a whole range of possibilities you've never even thought of. I love that. The ego doesn't quite know what to do with that. But just imagine with me an energetic field of potentiality that can be activated through the combining of our power of visionary faith and compassionate, authentic action that takes us there. Can you feel that? Can you see that?
Yes.
One of my favorite quotes is, "Only those who can see the invisible can do the impossible." And we do that as we celebrate the seed. And a big part of this is learning to believe in our potential more than our past. Even when our vision has yet to be demonstrated. Believe in your potential more than your past. Why? Because we are fashioned by the power that creates and sustains all of life. That's why. The one life is living itself through and as every one of us here. We are all carrier waves of that power that birthed us, that breeds us. Do you feel that? You are a focal point of divine consciousness. You are the divine presence in expression. And that presence is closer than our very, very breath, always. And we become aware of it through the stillness, feeling that presence. One of our SEE students described it as catching a whiff of holiness. I love that. It's so important every day to enter the silence, the secret place of the Most High, to listen to the still small voice that whispers the truth that we can, rather than the critical yapping that tells us that we can't, along with all the possible reasons why. Do you know that voice?
Yes.
Yes. It's not the truth. So what do you desire in life? A healthy body, loving, harmonious relationship, successful, fulfilling career, prosperity, a kinder, more compassionate world? In order to bring potential into manifestation, we have to become, in the words of Norman Vincent Peale, practicing possibilitarians. Having faith in the power within us to overcome any outer condition, and that means we start to not only dance with the melody of the future, we begin to live the dance. Live the dance. Are you ready to become a possibilitarian?
Yes.
If you find the reality you're living in is not one to your liking, this is a good time to stop and see where you may have been making an agreement with difficulty. Ask yourself if it would be all right if your life got to be easier. And if the answer is yes, begin by questioning your limiting beliefs. What are you perceiving that is not true? And then using the mirror as evidence that it is. The Q process, very helpful in uncovering those beliefs. Then with self-compassion, work with the beliefs that you uncover to help them to release, to morph into more life-affirming true beliefs. And start listening for that melody of the future, for where you're being called to step out in faith. Listen as you spend your time in the silence, letting your heart bring forth a vision of something greater. And then plant the seed of whatever it is you want to have happen through intention. And then begin to dance that melody. Become a possibilitarian. Feel the way you're going to feel when it comes to pass. That takes practice. And take authentic action that nurtures the seed's growth. Ask your heart for guidance on what that action should be. It is time for us. It's time for us to stop doubting our divine eternal nature. It's time for us to get out of our own way and to use this power of faith to celebrate the seed as we actualize our potential, rather than being stuck in recreating our past. Are you ready to get out of the boat? Yes. All right. Thank you.